Mike Ryan. The Royston district on the border between Esmeralda and Nye counties in Nevada is very well known and very popular turquoise. And a lot of that was due to the large amounts of turquoise that came to market, mined by the Ottisons, but also a lot of that coming because of the pay digs that the Ottisons organized for about 10 years from about 2005, 2015. Royston is known for very beautiful turquoise. It's very hard turquoise, so much of it does not need to be stabilized. But a lot of it has been what we would call a mid-grade turquoise. And it really has never been treated in the same level as, let's say, some of the dark web that is the most favored now for the gem grade of number 8, Kingman, Lander Blue, certainly, or some of the gem grade from Bisbee. But there are some beautiful high grade and even gem grade turquoise from Royston, and that's what we're going to see today. So we're going to start by looking at the districts in the southern part of the state. And we see in this photo a number of the districts, and I want to draw your attention to the Crow Springs and Royston areas. Now, Royston used to be part of the Crow Springs Mineral District. It became its own district when there was silver discovered there, and there was a lot of high hopes that that would be a big silver producing area. That never really happened, but we do have the Royston district named. Fortunately, it's continued to be a major turquoise producer. And you can read all about that story about Royston, and it's really well documented in Turquoise in America, Part 2, 1910 to 1990. In the Royston district, most of it has been centered on Quartzite Mountain. And that mountain runs sort of in a northwest by southeast area. And on the very northern portion is where you have the Royal Blue claims that were the first turquoise claims in that area. And then as you come down to the southeast, you're going to encounter the Carmelita claims that are owned by Philip Chambliss. Many of those are relocation of the old Aztec claims. And then further on is Montezuma that is owned by the Ottison brothers. These all occur on what has been called high-grade ridge. And we're going to see some turquoise, very high-grade turquoise coming from that particular area, that high-grade ridge area. So we're going to start with a photo that is the front cover of Turquoise in America Part 3, The Stories of Turquoise, 1990 to 2020. And this front cover and the back cover, which we're also going to see, were photographed by Arlen Ben, and they really demonstrate some really exceptional polychrome, which Royston is known for having a polychrome with the combinations of the green and the blue. Beautiful, beautiful high-grade turquoise. The next photo is really the most famous mine in the Royston area, which is the Royal Blue. Now, the Royal Blue is a patent claim, meaning it has been patented and it is now private land. It is not on public land, a claim on public land. And that story is told also in Turquoise in America Part 3. But here we see a very large 700 carat cabochon that was mined by Lynn Ottison. And Lynn was the patriarch of the Ottison turquoise family, and he began mining in the area in the 1950s and was active well into the 1980s. Beautiful, beautiful example of royal blue turquoise. As we go southeast and we go across the Aztec claims, now called the Carmelita of Philip Chambliss, we reach the Montezuma. And the Montezuma, the Royston Montezuma, should be recognized as different than a similar claim in the Pilot Mountains that is also owned by the Ottisons. And that story of those Pilot Mountain claims is also included in both part 2 and in part 3, where we sort of bring the Pilot Mountain claims up to date. Now, I would consider all of this very high grade, bordering on gem grade turquoise. But the next turquoise we're going to see is really what I consider the highest grade, the highest gem grade from Royston. Now remember, Royston is a district, it has been sold and marketed under that claim. And I think a lot of that is because during the last 15 or 20 years, so much came onto the market from the pay digs. And even though they may have been going to specific claims, it came to the market as Royston. And that's what we know most of the material as Royston. But there are some of the claims that have their own distinctive names, and Montezuma is one of those. Here we see a very large cab, 1,000-carat cab of very, very high grade Montezuma turquoise. Finally, we're going to look at some photos of what I consider the highest grade from the Royston. And this came from Rob Stapp. Now, Rob is a longtime turquoise collector, turquoise dealer, and turquoise miner. And Rob's story is contained in Turquoise in America Part 3, The Stories of Turquoise, 1990 to 2020. And I encourage you to read that. It's really quite an interesting tale. But this was turquoise that Rob mined himself, dug out of the dumps, at what he believes to have been the Montezuma. And this would have been in 2004, 2005, very early on when Danny and Dean Ottison were organizing the pay digs. We talk about those in part 3 as well. Now, we're going to see an example of how difficult it is to photograph turquoise, because the first 2 photos you're going to see are this material. And this is all in specimen form, which is really quite extraordinary, because here we see this gem grade turquoise forming very thinly on this rock specimen. And you can imagine, after the blasting and being in the dumps, to have survived that is really quite extraordinary, and especially at this grade. But we see the first 2 photos, we see the turquoise photographed in natural light. And then the next 2 photographs, they're photographed at night. So we have different lighting on that. And of course, it's really true that both of these are accurate representations of the turquoise, because the turquoise is going to reflect the light, and it will show differently to the eye depending on the light source. And that's why turquoise can be so magical, because you're wearing it during the day and it looks one way, you go out at night with it and all of a sudden it has a very different look. So I hope you've enjoyed taking a look at this high grade and even gem grade Royston turquoise.